All right, today we're going to talk about Muradin. And for Muradin, I think a lot of people have this newfound thing, whether it's Mal'Ganis, Johanna, Diablo, Muradin, that you have to be able to disrupt the back line at all cost, whether that's using E to go in, whether that's trying to sit on top of a squishy, and all of that stuff, whether it's me trying to get on top of the healer. And a lot of people make that mistake that that's my job. In reality, your job as a tank should always be to set up kills. I need to be able to control an area. I need to be able to set up kills, and I need to make sure that my damage can do what they need to do, and I'm trying to enable that. That should be the role of a tank most of the time. There are moments where as a tank, you can dwarf toss in and then go in and make sure and do damage. You can lock down targets. Those aren't always going to be there. If I'm going against the Johanna, Mal'Ganis, Diablo, a Garrosh, all of these heroes that are meta right now, they are going to present a threat. If I move into the enemy team, my ranged heroes now have to try and figure out, can I go in there? Am I being zoned out? And that's always very difficult. And that's where the balance of a tank really comes in. But your main goal as a tank should be to control a point, to be able to set up kills for your team, and not go full dive. As a Muradin, everybody knows that once you dive in, it's really hard to make it out, especially if you go certain talents that don't allow you to live longer in those fights. And what you want to do is you want to be able to enable your team. And I want to get this started by talking about Muradin in that regard, because Muradin is one of the OGs in this department. He's been around for a long time. He remains mostly unchanged in some departments, despite some reworks. And I want to talk about the benefits of the different talents and the synergies that you can get out of these, as opposed to some of the newer builds you've been seeing, because I feel like those don't really grasp the true concept of what you're trying to do. You're always going to have momentary plays by going Haymaker and going Bronzebeard and doing all these different things, but that doesn't maximize what you can do for your team. That maximizes what you can do for yourself, but it doesn't help your team always. And that's a big problem, is that people aren't playing the builds that help themselves and help the team. They're playing the builds that only help themselves, and they're not doing much else about it. And I want to talk about that. Now, let's talk about Muradin. When you're in a brawl, when you're scrapping, it's very rare you're going to make your way out. 4 seconds. If you haven't taken damage in 4 seconds, second wind is a phenomenal talent. As a healer, you should always be like, ooh, my healer or the second wind hasn't kicked in for my Muradin yet as we're walking away. Don't heal him until this kicks in. That way you can wait for this to go, and then you heal him, and all of a sudden you're at like 60, 70, 80% health. That's much better. Those are different things. And Muradin's base kit, it's pretty hard because he doesn't have the most obvious stuns. And I think that's one of the reasons why Muradin struggles, is because it's not like a Diablo. It's not like a Garrosh. It's not like an ETC, where when they stun, I know it. A Muradin is much harder to be like, ooh, I can see it coming, instead of I see it after it happens. And that's what happens a lot with Muradin. I think that's one of the reasons why he's not that great. Thunderclap is a fantastic way to control a lot of enemy heroes, and there's multiple ways to use this. Your Dwarf Toss, you should be saving this more for safety and less for damage. If you're using this for damage and slows, that's tough. That's tough. So let's talk about the build. Third wind can be good, but if you think about fights, especially in the late game, how many times does your tank run out of a fight? It's not that often, and that makes it really hard, I think, for me to go into third wind. Is it a bad talent? No, it's actually really strong. It's actually really, really strong in terms of healing and what it can do to bring you back into a fight. And this can be good, but the odds of you walking out of a fight and getting this, I think, are really tough. Now, for Muradin, he's very much a late game hero. Post level 13, I think he's fantastic. Post level 16, he gets really good. And post level 20, he's one of the best late game tanks in the game. Why? Because one, all of his talents that are going to synergize for the late game. That's where a lot of the fights take place. Post level 13 is when your confidence with Muradin should skyrocket. And getting to the late game means that you can get extra damage, you can contribute to the fights, you can live longer. And the different ways of doing that, I think Perfect Storm is okay. While this is a damage talent, you are going to continue to increase your damage. If you finish your baseline quest, you can now hit those priority targets. You can go rewind late game and get this bonus value to where you can lock down a target multiple times. And the one thing that you should always remember, and if you've watched some of my other videos, is that setting up priority targets is so that you hope that your damage dealers are going to be able to see that and follow up on that damage. So the more that I can prep that priority target, the better I am. And Perfect Storm does that. It helps set up my priority target. 1, because I'm stunning them. 2, because I'm also going to get value out of setting up with all the CC and the stun that I've got going there. It's going to enable my own damage at level 7. And now all they have to do is follow up. And when I can start contributing more and more damage in that department, it now becomes that priority target becomes a lot scarier for them than it does anybody else. Third Wind can be good. I think this is okay on maps like Alterac, maps like Battlefield of Eternity, where you can walk away from skirmishes on objectives and then re-engage. Most other fights, most other areas, Third Wind is going to be really hard to get value out of. Block is a very situational thing when you're going against a full melee team. I think that can be good just so you're a little tankier, and that can be good. I think Perfect Storm is going to be the number one choice. Third Wind is more situational in my opinion, and Block is a very niche situation. Now, here's the dilemma at level 4. This is where things over the last year for Muradin I feel have gone off the rails. Thunderburn is fantastic. It does so much of what you're trying to do as a tank at level 4. It gets better as the game goes on. At level 4, I can now Thunderclap, and it's going to trigger a second time in that area. That is zone control. The Thunderclap alone is going to help me out a lot. It sticks around for a second, and then it's going to go again, right? So 2.5 seconds, it's going to go again. This is going to reduce attack speed, it's going to slow targets, and this is zone control. This is the type of tank that I want. I want a tank that can control an area. Muradin does that, and that's exactly what a lot of his kit is used to do. This is going to synergize really well with 13 by getting the second one. A lot of people have been going Reverberation. It increases the attack speed slow of Thunderclap from 25 to 50%. The only time I ever saw this picked back in the day was versus an Illidan in competitive, because other than that, you still only get one clap. You're only reducing it for 3.5 seconds, which is the equivalent of like 4 auto attacks from one hero as opposed to controlling an entire area. They added on the benefit of reducing cooldown of your heroic cooldown or heroic ability cooldown. Because most people are using this with Haymaker, it already makes it bad. And Reverberation, I think, is kind of a trap talent. This should be a very niche situation where they've got a Greymane, they've got an Illidan. I want to be able to stop an onslaught of people coming at me. Sledgehammer. I don't know why people pick this, and this one is such a hot debate, and I don't understand it, right? It deals extra damage to non-heroic enemies. The only time this was ever picked back in the day was a very weird situation where people were racing on Battlefield of Eternity. Now, bring up the second part of it. Hitting a hero grants an additional stack of your baseline quest. Everybody wants to finish that baseline quest. Finishing the quest is great. Finishing it early, as a Muradin, everybody knows until you get Avatar, until you get some type of healing at 13, you can get in a fight, but you can't stay in there very long, and that's what makes it tough. If you finish your baseline quest earlier, you're still in that weird zone of I'm not doing it. By the time you finish your quest, if you don't go this, you should have it done by 16, let alone 20. That's where most fights are won, 16 and greater, and that's where the deciding factor comes in. If you think that finishing your quest earlier is going to help you win these games as Muradin, I think that that's reaching just a little too hard. That's hoping for optimal circumstances in a lot of situations. The extra damage that you get to clearing camps, tell me how much you're really doing with those camps. I've seen people use the argument where it helps me gets camps faster on Hanamura. What do you do after you get that camp? You're not going and pushing structures. You're not using it to rotate. That's very hard to do in any type of Storm League environment. Thunderburn gives you area control. It gives you zone control. It keeps people locked in place. Imagine being slowed for multiple seconds, 4 or 5 seconds, and you're thinking, I need to get out of here. And if I move one way, I'm trapped. If I move the other, I'm out of the fight. And you're controlling that area. Not only that, but you're setting up for your level 7. Give him the axe is really good no matter what. At level 7, he doesn't exactly have the best talents. Heavy impact, I've seen people go this. When they originally buffed this, it was to stun. That was broken. 80% slow is good, but this also means that you normally have to dwarf toss in. Dwarf tossing in means you don't have a dwarf toss out, which is really scary for a lot of Muradins. You shouldn't really be using your E for damage. Towards the late game, 13, 16, you can E in to get in position because you have talents that will let you live. Pre-13, 16, that doesn't work the same way. So heavy impact, I think, is such an awkward talent. Give him the axe. Again, attacking heroes that are stunned, rooted, or slowed give you basic attack damage, and you're already getting value out of your stun from your Q, your Thunder Burn. You're creating problems for people on the front line. Going back to the original point, you need to create priority targets for your team to be able to kill. The way his kit is and the way his talents are, give him the axe works really well. Skullcracker in a really weird situation does work incredibly well versus something like Morales, but I don't want to go into the niche situations. But give him the axe just gives you so much damage. Your priority target, you go in, you stun, you auto, you W, you auto, and then you auto again. You don't want to QW in that situation. You're looking to Q, auto, W, auto. That way you keep your own personal CC train going. You keep it longer for give him the axe. And that's how it works. If you need to W auto Q, that's fine, so that it slows them down so it's easier to land the Q. There's so many different things you can do. Skullcracker, again, is one of those situations where there is a handful of heroes this works really well against. Artanis, Morales, a couple of the frontliners that you're going to play against that can be really annoying that you just want to interrupt every so often to make them stop doing things that make them unkillable. Level 10, don't pick Haymaker. If you're picking Haymaker, you're actually memeing. Avatar is so incredibly good, and this is for a lot of reasons. Post 13-16, it means that you now become this beast tank, and when you pick the right talents with Avatar, you're going to see that you become a very beefy target. Muradin has a high health pool. I think it's one of the top 5 in the games for the tanks, but he gets outscaled by other heroes. He doesn't have the same survivability. 25 armor when you dwarf toss doesn't last long enough to justify what you're doing, especially when most of the time that's your escape. And so Avatar, hands down, best pick here. 90 seconds means that it's around for a long time in the fight because it's 20 seconds. And then that 90-second cooldown, everything that's going, you should have it around for the next fight, which means that you don't really get it during those intermediate fights where you're coming in. So you do have to make sure with Muradin, you have to have different ways of survivability throughout that. Now, 13, there's been all the rage about Bronzebeard Rage ever since they buffed this a long time ago. Dealing damage around that and heal for 75% of the damage dealt this way. Basic attacks against the heroes that are stunned increase this damage by 100%, which means more damage, which means more healing. And a lot of that is appealing, but I want to go back to your level 4 talent. Thunderburn is insanely good with healing static. You get 5% of your maximum health for each hero hit by Thunderclap. If you are acting aggressive as a Muradin late game, and I don't mean aggressive to the point where you zone out your team, but where you put yourself right in the middle of the enemy team, and you're saying, come get me, and there's 2 people there, and you W, that's 10% of your life healing. It's going to clap a second time. You get another 10% healing. You've now hit for 20% of your health. And if you're in a big team fight, remember, that benefits your health from Avatar. So it's your base health plus the Avatar health. So you're healing for that 10%, that 20% of your Avatar health at this point, and it becomes that much better because you go from having one of the highest health pools to healing for 10% of that. And so you're adding on the health and you're healing for that. It makes it so amazing. Once you get to level 16, 20 especially with Rewind, this becomes almost godlike. Unless they run a complete CC train on you and complete blow up, which at that point you hope that you already have Avatar and 1W down, then healing static is going to heal you for so much. If there's 3 people there and you hit 3 one time and 1 or 2 the next time, you're talking about, and this is very easy to do because it's very generous and it's clapping twice in the same area. Again, previous thoughts, zone control as Muradin. I'm not a YOLO tank. I can be if I need to be, but I don't always need to be. I need to be a setup man. I need to be control. Bronzebeard, I think, is just way too ambitious to say, I'm trying to get this. I'm trying to live on top of these people. I'm trying to get the auto attacks out to these. Obviously, they're going to be stunned or slowed from your own abilities. That makes it very easy. But the amount of healing that you get from this versus this is a far cry to the maximum potential that you can get. And this is far more reliable because if you can't hit at least 1, that's a problem. Thunderstrike, don't even do it. 16. Now at 16, all of these have viability. Stone Form, I like this if you know that you're dealing with a lot of damage and you've been getting punished a lot. 13, you're obviously trying to heal. But Stone Form, same thing that I was talking about. Use this after you use Avatar. This is going to heal you for 30% of your maximum health over 10 seconds. Second one is disabled during this time. So this is your way to stay in a fight. And getting Avatar up, plus getting 30% of your heals here, plus whatever healing static is giving you, you now become just this super tanky beast. Now, this isn't always the pick because Dwarf Toss, getting that extra range to safety or to engage is actually really good. I wouldn't always recommend this because you can outrange your team pretty easily, but if you start to get comfortable with Muradin, you start to understand where I need to be, how I need to be there, and do I need that extra range, this can help. You also get the cooldown reduction, and the cooldown reduction just means 25 armor, because you get 25 armor when you Dwarf Toss. It is kind of a long cooldown at 10 seconds. It's in that middle ground, so getting this back means that you can jump again. So there are benefits to this. Same for Imposing Presence. Imposing Presence, I go over this in all the videos. This can be good in the right circumstance against a lot of auto attack team, also against a lot of auto attackers that are coming near you. Since this isn't activatable, you get the movement speed slow and the additional auto attack slow. So against, like, if somebody's running a Greymane Zul'jin, you best believe I'm probably thinking about Imposing Presence. It's going to help a lot. And all of these are good, and I think all of these are in the right circumstance. Stone Form is the safest. Dwarf Toss talent can be very good in a lot of circumstances as well. Imposing Presence, more of a situational thing. But Stone Form is going to be my default. Everything after that is, if I need this, then I'll go it. Else I'm going Stone Form. And normally it's going to be Stone Form no matter what. Now, you've already heard me allude to this already. Rewind. Rewind late game for Muradin means that he should be an absolute monster at this point, and there's nothing that people can really do about it unless they just have like 4 stuns in a row. There's almost no way that you can die at this point to say, you know what? I've been stacking my quest this entire time. It's definitely more than done. You can full kill a squishy target as a Muradin late game. That's how strong he gets between Give Him the Axe and your baseline quest. Rewind also adds to the other parts of your kit. I have Dwarf Toss. I have Reset on Dwarf Toss. If I need to get to a priority target, I'm trying to finish this game, I want to get on top of them. If I'm in the middle of a skirmish, I want to make sure and get my W and my Q out. I'm going to rewind. I'm going to hit W again. And that moment where I'm talking about healing for 15 to 20% of your health, I can now press W again. I've healed for 40% of my life. Some of the biggest plays you can make are just by making yourself unkillable and wearing all of those cooldowns that people are throwing at you. Rewind gives you that bonus damage. It gives you a lot. Again, remember that when you are trying to combo with Muradin, the idea is you want to Q auto, W auto. If need be, you can W auto Q. If you're really worried about it, you can W Q auto. And the same thing would go that if you're trying to full rewind kill a target, it would be Q auto, W auto, rewind, Q auto, W auto. At that point, you're doing a lot of damage, but you have to make sure that you're not stacking your abilities and you're getting the maximum value. Your stun on your Q is long enough to where you can Q auto, W auto, rewind, Q auto, and that's enough time so your cooldown reduction is going to be there and allow you to do as much as you possibly can. So there is a way to make sure that you can go and get onto a target. It also allows you to survive in a team fight by pressing W multiple times and becoming just super tanky, one of the hardest people to kill in the game post level 20, just with rewind alone, and going into your level 4 Thunderstorm and Healing Static. If you're picking the other talents, you're now becoming much more offensive and less defensive. And the reason why Muradin post 20 with rewind is so good is because your baseline is good, because you've gone this, and now it's like the kit that I've built this entire game has been good since 10. It's gotten really good at 13. It's gotten great at 16. And at 20, I'm now probably one of the best tanks in the game. Muradin gets punished a lot in the early game, which is where second wind does come in. That's the problem with Muradin. The other thing is your stun is a skill shot, and it's not that easy. You think about Blaze as a tank. He can charge in, and it's an entire area that it can hit. With Muradin, it's much more difficult. If you miss your Q, then you're reliant on your W being that zone control. And if you think you have 100% Q accuracy, you don't, which is another reason why that second W will come into play there, is because you now have that forgiveness factor. Yes, your baseline is going to give you that cooldown reduction. You'll have it there over time, but you don't necessarily need to get there quicker. You're not that good in the early game. Post 13 is where Muradin really starts to shine. You have to play a lot more safe, a lot safer in the early game than some of the other tanks. It's like a Diablo. I don't really want to fight too much in the early game as a Diablo because I don't have souls. Muradin and Diablo have similar baseline health pools, but one of them scales slightly different than the other. Muradin's comes in the form of healing later in the game as opposed to Diablo's scaling with the minimal healing. And so a lot of that, you have to keep that in mind if you're playing Muradin in the early game. Be safe. Don't dive into the back line. If you dive into the back line, you might as well take your hands off your keyboard and your mouse and apologize to your team that my bad, I went in, that 25 armor doesn't do anything for me. I have no way of healing. And if you do make it out, you better be thanking your healer and saying, thank you for keeping me alive. I was pretty dumb to go in there and EN to a full health team because I'm not going to be able to do anything there. And so those are all things in the early game. In the later game, you can get away with those plays. But again, you are an area zone control hero that can do damage as well as enable your team. You need to figure out the balance of both of those. If you're trying to go full damage with Reverberation or Sledgehammer in Bronzebeard Rage, you're now limiting your time of fight time. You're now limiting your fight time. So if you're not getting those kills right away and you're not fighting in there, the amount of time that you have to survive, and you better hope that your team can finish those, and you better hope that you finish those, because if you miss, and let's say your teammate's not exactly on, your health bar goes down, and that time that you can stay in that fight goes down drastically. Let's say I take away a small percentage of my damage, and I can stay in that fight longer because I went more survivability, and I'm giving my team more opportunities to help up. And I think a lot of that is missed because so many changes were done between Reverberation for the cooldown reduction. Bronzebeard was buffed up. And in reality, the old school OG build of Thunder Burn plus Healing Static is still just one of the tankiest builds that you can have. It allows you to fight. It allows you to do more for your team. It allows you to stay in a fight longer for yourself. And that makes you better for your team. It doesn't make you better when you go in. We can all play Reverberation. We can all play Bronzebeard Rage. And you know what? From time to time, we're going to pog out and we're going to get those kills. But in terms of consistency and what you want to do as a tank, not just for yourself, but as a tank, should be built around being a zone control, part-time damage dealing tank, not a full, I'm going to carry this team on my back. Think about yourself playing a Raynor, a Vala, a Kalthas. If my Muradin dives in and just goes full Bronzebeard on me and Haymakers or even just avatars, I can't follow that. So now I'm giving up, I'm taking an extra 500 damage from a Muradin and I'm sacrificing 1,000 damage from my team, potentially. That's never a good trade. And those are things you got to remember when playing Muradin. You get your combo right, you get your build right, you become a tanky hero, and Muradin's so much better than I think a lot of people give him credit for, but I still think when it comes to other tanks, he's not that good because it's not as easy to see when the stuns are coming out, how quickly can I follow up on that, and the stun duration of the Q. It's like I don't visually see it as well as I would an ETC slide, a garage toss, things like that. They're not as easy to recognize. Therefore, my reaction time has to be faster and it has to be more on point. And that's not exactly easy. And that's Muradin.